What if I told you the most famous Camaro of 1969 carried a secret intake system that Chevrolet never wanted you to see? What if the legendary Z28's high-revving 302 engine was really born out of a legal loophole, not raw performance genius? And what if the car you thought was America's most honest muscle machine was hiding more mysteries in its build sheets, dealer lots, and racetracks than anyone cared to admit? For more than 50 years, I've studied Detroit's golden age. Of horsepower, back when gasoline was 30 cents a gallon, a Friday night meant street races outside the A&W, and every kid wanted a Z28 parked in their driveway. I've spoken with racers, mechanics, and even factory insiders who handled these machines when they were new. In today's film, we're counting down 20 weird facts about the 1969 Camaro Z28 they never wanted you to know. Don't forget to pause, comment, and share which fact surprised you most, because if you were there in '69, this is your history number 20, the mystery cross ram. Intake collectors whisper about it. Racers still argue about it. The 1969 Camaro Z28 was offered, but only through back-channel parts counters, with a rare cross-ram dual 4-barrel. Intake manifold. It wasn't on the official option list. It wasn't meant for the average driver. And yet, some dealers slipped it into customer cars, under the table. The system featured two Holley 4-barrels perched sideways, feeding the 302 like a race engine. Chevy never advertised it because it was nearly impossible to tune for street use. Idle was rough, throttle response was finicky, and emissions were a nightmare. But on the drag strip or road course, it was lethal. Period road tests showed gains of 30 to 40 horsepower, enough to give Penske's Trans Am cars an edge. To this day, spotting a genuine cross-ram Z28 is like finding buried treasure. Most were sold in crates, never installed. And yet, hidden inside dusty garages across America, a few of these secret intakes still sit, waiting to fire again. Number 19. The 302 cubic inch loophole. The Z28 wasn't born from marketing hype. It was born from a racing rule book. The Sports Car Club of America's Trans Am series mandated a maximum engine size of 305 cubic inches. Chevrolet, wanting to dominate the series, built a 302, a Frankenstein motor created by pairing the 327's block with the 283's crankshaft. Officially, Chevrolet claimed 290 horsepower, but insiders admit that was a political number, printed low to appease insurance companies. In reality, properly tuned 302s could churn out well over 350 horsepower, screaming safely past 7,000 RPM, a sound few engines could match. The loophole worked. Camaro Z28s became terror weapons on the track, competing toe-to-toe with Boss Mustangs. And yet, for the average buyer, it was an odd choice. A small displacement engine in an era obsessed with big blocks. But for those who knew the secret, the 302 wasn't underpowered. It was untouchable. Number 18. VIN mismatches that haunt collectors. Here's a weird one. In 1969, Chevy's factory paperwork was a mess. Some Z28s left the line with VIN codes that didn't match their build sheets. Others carried engines stamped with partial codes that collectors still argue about. Imagine paying 6 figures at auction for your dream Z28, only to discover the numbers don't line up. Is it fake? Is it a dealer swap? Or was it simply Chevrolet's sloppy record keeping? The truth is, sometimes it was all three. GM insiders admit the 1969 model year was chaotic. It ran longer than any Camaro year, almost 17 months, while Chevy scrambled to prepare the 1970 redesign. Mistakes happened. Engines got swapped. Paperwork got fudged. And now, 55 years later, collectors are left scratching their heads. So next time someone brags about their numbers matching Z28, remember, the numbers might be telling a stranger story than they realize. Number 17. The oddball rear end. Ratios muscle cars of the era were all about axle ratios. 3.73s for the street, 4.10s for the strip. But the Z28 offered some strange choices. You could order ratios as steep as 4.56, making highway driving nearly unbearable. Or, bizarrely, you could opt for a 3.07, a gear better suited for station wagons than a high-revving 302. Why? Because Chevrolet let customers special order what racers wanted. Road racers demanded tight gearing to keep the 302 in its power band. Meanwhile, a few odd buyers wanted fuel economy or highway cruising. The result? A Z28 that either screamed at 4,000 RPM on the freeway or loafed along like a six-cylinder sedan. Today, these oddball gears make for fascinating survivor stories. Imagine a kid in 1969 ordering a 456 Z28, then wondering why he couldn't drive it comfortably to prom. Number 16. Hood vents that fooled everyone. Take a close look at the Z28's cowl induction style hood. Many buyers assumed those tiny vents meant ram air power. The truth? They didn't do much of anything. The 1969 Camaro Z28's hood vents were mostly cosmetic, a styling flourish to make the car look racier. Only the rare, dealer-installed cowl induction hoods with functional flapper doors actually fed cooler air to the engine. In fact, period mechanics joked that the vents collected more rainwater than horsepower. Yet enthusiasts swore the car felt faster with them. The psychology of speed mattered as much as the engineering, and Chevy was happy to let the myth continue. Number 15. The Z28. That didn't exist in brochures. When the 1969 Camaro first rolled into dealerships, something strange happened. Flip open the glossy Chevrolet brochures, and you won't find the Z28 listed at all. For months, buyers had no official literature to tell them the car even existed. Why would Chevy hide its hottest performance car? Insiders suggest it was intentional. The Z28 was never meant for the average buyer. It was a homologation special designed for racing, not daily commuting. By keeping it off the brochures, Chevy discouraged walk-in customers who might complain about its temperamental 302 engine or stiff suspension, but word spread through magazines and racetracks. Enthusiasts stormed dealers demanding the secret package they'd read about in Car and Driver. The absence from the brochures made it feel like a forbidden option, something you had to know about to get. And that exclusivity gave the Z28 a cult-like aura from day one. Number 14. Dealers who played parts. Roulette, not every Z28 you saw in 1969 was built exactly the same. Why? Because local dealers often swapped parts to close sales. A kid wanted rally wheels, but his car came in with plain steelies. The dealer would yank a set from another Camaro on the lot. Some dealers even went further, installing spoilers, stripes, or performance options after delivery to make the cars appear more desirable. One Michigan dealer was notorious for selling dealer-tuned Z28s that had upgraded carburetors and headers installed before the customer ever drove away. The practice confused collectors decades later. Was that spoiler a factory option? Or a dealer swap? Did the car really leave Norwood assembly with those wheels? For many Z28s, the answer is lost to history. The only certainty is that in 1969, Chevy dealers weren't afraid to bend the rules to move cars. Number 13, the first 500 cars. Weren't for you. Most buyers don't know this, but the first run of Z28s wasn't intended for the public at all. Chevrolet quietly built the first 500 cars strictly to meet SCCA homologation requirements. The Trans Am rulebook demanded at least 1,000 examples to qualify, but GM wanted to test the waters by shipping only half that number at first. These early Z28s were essentially race cars in disguise. Many went straight into the hands of racing teams, dealers with track connections, or insiders who understood the car's true purpose. By the time the broader public even knew the option existed, the Z28 was already scoring points on America's toughest road courses. This backdoor strategy explains why some early production Z28s have odd features or experimental parts. Chevy was still figuring out what the car needed to survive 500 miles of racing. And it's why the legend of the Z28 began not on Main Street, but on the grid at Sebring and Riverside. Number 12. The Forbidden Paint Color Chevrolet offered a rainbow of colors in 1969, but here's the twist. Not all of them were officially allowed on the Z28. Certain high-impact hues, like Daytona Yellow or Hugger Orange, were restricted at first. GM worried that wild paint jobs would clash with the Z28's serious racing image. Of course, buyers found ways around it. Clever dealers filed special order requests, sneaking through wild paint codes that technically weren't approved. The result? A handful of Z28s rolled out in outrageous shades never meant to exist. Today, these forbidden color cars are holy grails. At auctions, a real Hugger Orange or Daytona Yellow Z28 can command massive premiums, not just for the color, but for the story of defying GM's rules. What began as a factory restriction ended up fueling some of the rarest collector cars in Camaro history. Number 11. The factory misprint that sparked lawsuits buried in Chevy's 1969 sales literature was a misprint so glaring it caused headaches for years. One version of the ordering guide listed the Z28 as available with an automatic transmission. Sounds normal, except it wasn't true. The 302 engine was never offered with an automatic from the factory. It only came with a 4-speed, because Chevy knew the high-revving small block would shred a slush box in days. But when customers saw the misprint, some demanded automatics anyway. Dealers took deposits. Arguments broke out when cars arrived with clutches. In at least 2 cases, buyers actually sued dealerships for false advertising. Chevrolet quickly corrected the mistake, but by then, the damage was done. Collectors still joke about the phantom automatic Z28, a car that never officially existed, but lives on in paperwork errors and angry letters to Chevrolet. Number 10. The SCCA rule cheat that birthed the Z28. The Camaro Z28 exists today because Chevrolet played the rulebook like a violin. The Sports Car Club of America limited Trans Am cars to engines under 305 cubic inches. Chevrolet had no suitable engine on the shelf, so engineers created one. They took the 327 block, stuffed it with a 283 crankshaft, and out came the now famous 302 cubic inch small block. It wasn't just an engine. It was a loophole weapon. Chevy rated it at a suspiciously low 290 horsepower to keep insurers calm, but on the dyno, race-prepped versions cranked out closer to 400. The little motor loved to scream past 7,000 RPM, making it a perfect match for road course warfare. Without this bit of creative rule-bending, the Z28 wouldn't have existed at all. It wasn't born from market demand. It wasn't born from a corporate plan. It was born from the desperation to beat Ford on Sunday. Number 9. The secret parts pipeline. Behind the scenes, Chevrolet's racing ban was still technically in place. GM's corporate policy, announced in 1963, forbade direct factory involvement in motorsports. But if you looked closely at Penske's and Donahue's Camaros, they always seemed to have the latest, trickest parts, long before the public did. How? Through a shadow pipeline. Engineers at Chevrolet would quietly ship experimental parts like heavy-duty blocks, prototype intake manifolds, or special suspension pieces to trusted teams under the radar. They weren't in the catalogs. They weren't available at dealers. But they showed up at racetracks, bolted onto cars that suddenly looked unstoppable. Penske himself admitted years later that the line between factory stock and factory secret was paper thin. The Z28's legend wasn't built on showroom cars alone. It was built on the whispered shipments that slipped through loading docks at night. Number 8. Smokey Yunick. Almost killed it. If there was a man who loved to push rules further than anyone, it was Smokey Yunick. The legendary mechanic. and Racer got his hands on early Camaros and began to twist them into something the rulebook never imagined. Smokey's cars were so radical, altered body dimensions, hidden fuel tricks, that SCCA officials nearly banned Camaros altogether rather than deal with him. Yunick's genius almost turned into the Z28's downfall. His relentless pursuit of loopholes embarrassed Chevrolet and infuriated competitors. The SCCA scrambled to close loopholes, and Camaro's future in the series teetered on the edge. But in a strange way, Smokey's madness forced Chevy to sharpen the Z28 program. The cars that followed were leaner, meaner, and ready to compete fairly. Smokey nearly broke the program, but instead, he made it stronger. Number 7. The COPO crossover that wasn't supposed to exist. In 1969, Chevrolet had a backdoor system called COPO, Central Office Production Order. It was meant for fleet buyers who wanted special paint or equipment, but savvy dealers used it to unlock monster engines like the 427 in Camaros. Here's the twist. A handful of Z28 buyers stumbled into strange COPO crossovers. Some cars left the factory with Z28 trim but COPO-level hardware, creating odd hybrids that defied categorization. Were they official? No. Were they documented? Rarely. These ghost cars blurred the line between small block purity and big block muscle. Collectors today argue endlessly about whether they're real Z28s, COPOs, or something else entirely. What's certain is that in 1969 the rules could be bent, and the result was cars that shouldn't exist, but somehow do. On paper, the Z28s that Roger Penske's team ran in Trans Am were just like what you could buy at the dealer. In reality, they were rolling laboratories of trick engineering. The bodies were acid-dipped to shave pounds. Panels were massaged for aerodynamics. Engines were hand-built to tolerances no factory could achieve. To the casual fan, it looked like Chevrolet was selling race winners right off the lot. But in truth, Penske's cars were ringers, crafted in secret with help from Chevy insiders who bent the rules just enough to stay ahead. The myth of the stock Z28 dominating Trans Am was just that, a myth. What shocked people was not that Penske won, but how far from showroom reality those cars really were. Number 6. Penske's stock cars were anything but on paper. The Z28s that Roger Penske's team ran in Trans Am were just like what you could buy at the dealer. In reality, they were rolling laboratories of trick engineering. The bodies were acid-dipped to shave pounds. Panels were massaged for aerodynamics. Engines were hand-built to tolerances no factory could achieve. To the casual fan, it looked like Chevrolet was selling race winners right off the lot. But in truth, Penske's cars were ringers, crafted in secret with help from Chevy insiders who bent the rules just enough to stay ahead. The myth of the stock Z28 dominating Trans Am was just that, a myth. What shocked people was not that Penske won, but how far from showroom reality those cars really were. Number 5. The high school drag racer who shamed big blocks in 1969. Most kids drooled over Chevelles with 396X or Corvettes with 427s. The idea that a small 302 Camaro could run with them sounded ridiculous, until the local drag strips proved otherwise. One famous story comes out of Ohio. A teenager, armed with nothing more than his father's Z28 and sticky rear tires, lined up against big block Mopars and Chevys on Friday nights. To the crowd's shock, the little 302 screamed past cars with nearly 100 more advertised horsepower. The secret wasn't brute torque, it was RPM. The Z28 loved to be revved, and in the quarter mile, its screaming top end could embarrass heavier, overconfident rivals. Word spread. High schoolers nicknamed it the mouse that roared. Suddenly, the Z28 wasn't just a track star, it was a street legend. Stories of small block Davids toppling big block Goliaths became part of its folklore, fueling its reputation long after the engines cooled. Number 4. the ghost options on window stickers. Collectors love decoding Camaro window stickers, but with the 1969 Z28, some options appear that technically didn't exist. Enthusiasts call them ghost options. For example, certain dealer paperwork lists air conditioning on Z28s, which was impossible since the high-revving 302 wasn't compatible with the AC compressor of the day. Other stickers show bizarre axle ratios or trim codes that Chevrolet never formally offered. So why are they there? Historians believe clerical errors at the factory and dealer swaps created phantom options. Some were innocent typos. Others were deliberate dealer tricks to pad profits, charging for equipment the car didn't actually have. For collectors today, these ghost options create confusion. Is it a mistake, a scam, or evidence of how chaotic Chevrolet's ordering system really was in 1969? The truth may never be fully sorted out, but the mystery keeps Camaro historians busy decades later. Number 3. The longest Camaro model year. Ever one of the strangest quirks about the 1969 Camaro has nothing to do with horsepower at all. It was simply time. The 69 model year ran longer than any other in Camaro history, almost 17 months. Why? Chevrolet wasn't ready with the all-new 1970 model, delayed by styling changes and production slowdowns. So the 69 cars kept rolling off the line well into November, long after normal model year cutoffs. Dealers kept advertising them as brand new even as the calendar flipped. This odd extension had a huge impact. It meant production numbers for 1969 ballooned to over 243,000 units, including more than 20,000 Z28s, by far the most of any year. It also created endless confusion for collectors because some late 69s were sold just weeks before the 1970 Camaro launched. For enthusiasts, the endless 69 runs cemented it as the definitive Camaro. It was the car everyone saw in showrooms, the longest. And maybe that's why to this day, when people picture a classic Camaro, 9 times out of 10, they're thinking of a 69. Number 2. The last-minute law. That almost killed the 302 by late 1969, the muscle car era was already facing storm clouds. Insurance rates were climbing, emissions laws were tightening, and the federal government was eyeing new safety and pollution regulations. In fact, one piece of legislation nearly killed the Z28's 302 engine before it ever got a second act. The new standards demanded lower emissions and quieter exhausts, two things the screaming, high-compression 302 was never designed to deliver. Chevrolet engineers privately admitted the engine couldn't survive into the 1970s without major re-engineering. That's why the 1970 Z28 dropped the legendary small block in favor of the heavier LT1 350. To the public, it looked like Chevrolet was simply updating the Camaro. But behind the scenes, it was panic. A car built for high-revving defiance had collided with Washington's new rules. The fact that the 302 lasted even 3 years is a miracle of timing, and a reminder that the muscle car dream was already under siege before the decade ended. Number 1. The secret GM memo. Admitting the Z28 was never supposed to exist, the grand reveal is this: the Camaro Z28, the car that defined Chevrolet's racing image, was never part of the original plan. In internal memos uncovered years later, GM executives admitted the Z28 option was not meant for mass production. It was conceived only as a low-volume, rulebook-driven racer, something to check a box for SCCA compliance. In fact, one memo warned dealers not to push the car too hard, noting its lack of comfort options, its rough idle, and its incompatibility with air conditioning. Corporate brass feared it would confuse buyers used to plush SS or RS Camaros. And yet, the Z28 slipped through the cracks. Racers demanded it, enthusiasts discovered it, and dealers realized it brought traffic to showrooms. What began as a reluctant, almost hidden program became the crown jewel of Chevrolet performance. The irony is chilling. The car that became America's favorite Camaro was, in the eyes of GM leadership, a mistake. A secret that was never supposed to leave the track. So there you have it. 20 weird, hidden, and shocking truths about the 1969 Camaro Z28. The car that broke rules, bent paperwork, fooled buyers, and somehow became a legend. If you grew up in the late 60s, you remember what it felt like to hear one of these cars wind out past $7,000 on a Saturday night. If you didn't, now you know why those who did still talk about it half a century later. Before you go, tell me in the comments which fact surprised you the most. Was it the phantom automatic transmission, the secret parts pipeline, or the revelation that the Z28 wasn't even supposed to exist? And stick around, because next time we'll uncover the untold story of another icon, the 1970 Chevelle SS, and the scandal behind its horsepower ratings. Until then, remember, legends aren't born in boardrooms. They're forged on back roads, drag strips, and racetracks. The Camaro Z28 was proof of that.